Hey, everybody, and welcome to our latest Train Like a Trooper podcast. We're super excited to have two special guests here with us today, Captain Tanner Keasler and Trooper Trent Keasler. They have the same last name, which is kind of a good segue into this is the first one of a new podcast that we're doing called our Legacy Podcast, which is about people within the patrol that are related, who maybe followed in their father's footsteps, brother, mother, sister, and kind of talking about that and kind of how that came to be. And Lieutenant Southwell, we kind of talked about doing this for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a fun podcast to do. We got a lot of exciting guests to come on, kind of talk about how their family, how the patrol has played such an impact on their family and everybody that's been involved in it. So looking forward to it. You guys are the first guests to be on this podcast, so we're really excited to have you on. I can't think of anybody better to start with.
Welcome. To be first.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Tanner, I've known you for a long time. We're on ERT together for a little bit. Mm-hmm. Had a lot of fun doing that. And Trent, I've never really had an opportunity to meet you, so I'm looking forward to meeting you and find out a little bit more about you in this podcast.
Thank you for having us. We are happy to be here.
Yeah.
So you can't tell by looking at you who's the older brother.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's it's me by about 4 years.
Okay.
We share birthdays where we're both even numbers and odd numbers. So for right now, this goes into our even year.
Where did y'all grow up at?
We kind of grew up all over. So we started out in Muskogee where Trent was born, and then just kind of continued about every 4 years, moving 4 hours farther south, and stopped on the north side of Houston. And then after our parents split up, we moved back to Weatherford. So finished out middle school in Weatherford, and then high school and obviously college in Weatherford. The college portion for me, obviously, and then Trent was there with high school. Okay. And then I'll let you finish out your.
Yeah, so we grew up in Weatherford and went to high school there and graduated there. Went to OU for about a year and then came back, finished out at the Southwestern, and we've been there pretty much ever since.
So how long did y'all live in Texas?
We left when I was 12, so I think it would have been really 8 years total. After our parents divorced, my father moved farther down into Corpus Christi area. On the north side of the bridge in that area called Gregory, Portland. And we would visit him a few times throughout that year, the summers typically. And then, so it would have been 12 going into 7th grade for me. So it would have been your
I think I started in 3rd grade.
Yeah.
And then the decision was made to move back to Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Thankfully, because otherwise you would have been Texas troopers.
Well,
we're glad to have you here.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate it.
Yeah. Did y'all play sports in high school?
Yes.
Yeah, we both did. I played football and baseball growing up. Basically our whole lives is basically what we did. We wrestled a little bit when we were younger, and then
Organized wrestling.
Yeah, obviously.
Okay.
And
what's the other side?
Yeah,
tell me the other family style. Yeah, just family style wrestling. Just like that.
So then, after high school and stuff like that, just went to college and did the college thing.
Then I played a couple of years of rugby for Southwestern for a men's league, and had a good time doing it.
What position did you play in rugby?
I was winger, but I was trying to work my way into scrum half as much as possible so I can get into the pit just a little bit. It's just an amazing game to get, especially if you grow up playing football, wrestling, and obviously playing soccer, which is kind of, not new to people in the area, but to throw rugby into it, it's kind of every young man's dream to get to do all those sports at one time.
I played a little bit in high school. It was fun.
Yeah.
That's what I always want to call lacrosse.
Yes.
I'm like, what is it you play? Rugby? No, lacrosse.
So what was the influence at what point individually did you guys become interested in the patrol? I'm assuming your interest in the patrol was first.
Yes. So we have an older brother. His name is Justin Gandy. He was a lieutenant, retired in 2020 as a lieutenant with Troop S. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And he would come through going out to Burns Flat, and he would stop in. And it was, would have been our junior year, or my junior year, excuse me. And he would tell you, he's like, dude, this is going to be the best job. Being an Oklahoma State trooper is everything you've ever wanted. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And when I walked into, I think it was the spring of what would have been 2000. I think they started in 99. But don't get me lying to you about that, sorry. And I walked into his graduation. I said, I don't know what this is, but he's right. I want this. And then from there, it was just constant ride-alongs. I was lucky enough, and I'd say that God lined everything up for me, because the summer after he graduated, I was able to go to Cadet Lawman. And then from there, it was just everything I did was trying to, become an Oklahoma State trooper at that point.
You just blew my mind because I know Gandy well. I think he was the lead TAC in my academy. Is that correct?
I don't believe he had done any academies, but I could be wrong in that. He was at Troop A for a while. He was on motors, Troop A.
Okay.
But he may have done some LEDT with your academy. He was an LEDT instructor.
And how'd you say, what's the relation there between y'all?
We're half brothers. We're the same mother.
Yeah. I had no idea.
What was it about his graduation that really hooked you?
I'd always kind of thought I would join the military at some point in time. And when I had an opportunity to play a sport in college and fell in love with, luckily, and being blessed with a lady that's now my wife, I said, hey, I need to figure out a different path in this. So the military was part of getting my college paid for. But I don't know what the awe that struck me when I walked in there, but it was just amazing. And I don't know if it was the uniforms, if it was just the presence of everybody there. And obviously when you're younger, looking at state troopers and you don't see behind the curtain, there's that huge sense of awe that comes just from seeing somebody in uniform that you see, especially growing up in Western Oklahoma. When a trooper walks into a restaurant, it feels as if time kind of stands still for a brief time while everybody looks at them. And it's just that little bit different. I don't know how to explain it. It's not that the job is any different. It's just whatever that person emits as they come into a room, you just see that difference. And that was huge because there were so many that were there.
I was going to ask you that. Western Oklahoma has got a great history of having some extraordinary troopers. Mm-hmm. Were there any that particularly stuck out to you guys that you knew growing up, or was Gandy your first introduction to the patrol?
Justin was probably the first one we saw that was like, we had like a relationship with. Now you would see them around town, and what for me it was like the year like when they had those 95 Caprices, the big Shamu looking cars, and you'd see them, and for Western Oklahoma they were always. I always thought there was like, man, these guys are like superheroes. Like seeing it as a kid, it was like they were always in great shape, always looked good, and always had their hats on. And I was just like, man, these guys are like the special forces of law enforcement, is what I thought growing up. And then, seeing Justin and like seeing that, I could, I was a little younger than Tanner, so it didn't have that big of an impact, but I can remember seeing all the troopers, all the hats, and the brass, and everybody was in shape, and I was just like, whoa. I was like, you're that little, you're just kind of thought all cops were the same, but then it opened up this new chapter in our lives, and you were just like, I wanted to do that. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, and until that, I had never once thought about being a state trooper.
Yeah.
I was a year older than Trooper Kendall Johnson, retired badge number 469. His oldest child was a girl named Sarah. And so I would kind of see them, but I had two friends that we went to school with. One was Leah Keaton, that was Bob Keaton's daughter, and then Miranda Webb, which was John Webb's daughter. They're both since retired. But that was kind of the closest that I could get to a trooper without actually just using my brother as the one that I knew. That was kind of the safe space in the recruitment, because I would, after I turned 18, was able to go up and try to do ride-alongs with him, and and I would try to get those every opportunity I had. He broke in Guyman, so we'd pack up and like, hey, we're gonna drive up to Guyman from Weatherford, which is about a 4-hour trip or whatever, and say, hey, I'm gonna go ride with Justin for 2 nights and then come back home. So it was cool that it was so accessible in that way, but I didn't really have an external source of validation that wasn't within our family for wanting to do that.
So he graduated out of what academy?
51st.
Okay, and then you decided that you were going to apply for the patrol.
Yes. And so I got on in 2005 out of the 55th Patrol School. And there was a kind of a 3-year, you ask the guys in the 54th, it's 2.5 to 3 year hiatus of academies. So, and they were excited to see us show up, because they had to be the new guys for, I'm going to say 3 years just to round it out. But it was definitely an experience. And, luckily, when we walked down the hallway going to classroom, was then A and B, but classroom A, I got to see Justin's picture, found where his academy photo was at, and look at it every morning and make sure, okay, that's my motivation to get on this wall also, was to Just make it through the next meal. Say hi to him after breakfast. Say hi to him after lunch. Say hi to him after dinner type of deal.
At this point, he's going through the academy. Did you start to gain an interest in the patrol at that time?
Yeah, so I was going to, when he went to the academy, that was the fall of my freshman year in college. So I was actually going to school at OU. I was going to go to aviation school. I was at aviation school. And so I'm up there doing that, and they graduate. You graduate in like December, because I think I had finals. And anyways, so I'm up there doing my thing, and he gets off break-in. I hadn't seen him for a while, and so I was like, hey, I'm going to come out, spend the weekend with you. And, his life was hectic with break-in, so we hadn't talked a lot. So I was like, yeah, he was like, come out. So I come out, and it was like the perfect ride along, from my viewpoint, is because, I think he picks me up, he gets on the radio, he had his, so that had been summer, he had his summer uniform on, gets on the radio, and I'm like, man, this is like serious stuff. And I think he gets into a crash, go out there, work a crash, and you could just see like the presence of, I mean, obviously it was my brother, but like the way the fire department dealt with him, and the communication with the sheriff's office, and, just the citizens of Oklahoma, how they treated him with so much more respect than everybody else. And, it was very, enticing. And then, after that, we go to the hospital, and the same thing, the nurses and the way they respected them. And then, we stopped a few cars, and then he arrests the guy. This is like, middle of nowhere, Roger Mills County. It was like me and him and, 50 people driving around, and it was so cool. We were out, till like 4 a.m. and I was like, man, I couldn't get enough of it. Mm-hmm. So then, it was like, hey, when can I come back? And then it was like a life-changing path. Like, okay, I'm done with aviation school. I go back to Southwestern. I take 19 hours of summer class because I knew none of my stuff was going to transfer over from OU. And then I just started the path. And, about every month I would ask him if I could ride with him. And, he was cool about it. He would let me ride. And then he would start introducing me to, people that would have, not that I knew at the time, they just had huge impacts in my life, like Aaron Hunter, Chris Hunter, Stephen Cornell, just everybody in Troop H. And they were, they were intimidating to meet them at first, but then they were so encouraging at the time, of like, hey, do this to try to get the path, to get you out here. And I would, looking back, they would always say, like, when you get on, I was like, oh my gosh, like they've already accepted me. And it was very cool, like how they, and obviously, being Tanner's little brother, so that helped. But, they didn't have to do that. They chose to do that, take interest in me. And, I'm very thankful that I got to meet them because, and this is probably 2007, like these guys were like my future mentors, guys I looked up to, like people that broke me in, they're at my wedding. And, it's just, it's crazy the path that God leads you to. And, I'm still thankful for them. And, I was looking back at this podcast, I was like, okay, like, I don't want to, if I can shout people out, like there's so many people I can, think about that, my brother Tanner, my brother Justin, and I'm sure we'll get into it later, but like that's like a fear of mine here. Cause like I've had so many impactful people during this, almost 14 years that I don't want to let anybody like not get the credit that they deserve, because it's not my doing. God put these people in my life, and they made me better. It wasn't, now I had to put in some work, but it's really a lot of them like just being great influences. And
And so you talk about all the encouragement and stuff, though, but obviously the academy is notoriously difficult and stressful. Yeah. Is it more so, would you say, or do you get a little bit extra if you have a relative on patrol?
Oh, so I don't know that anybody knew who Justin was compared to me. And if you do a different podcast with other guys on the 55th, and they'll probably tell you one way or another. We were going to have a rough academy regardless because of the people that were in that academy.
So did you keep it quiet that you had an older half brother on the patrol?
I think some of them knew.
Yeah.
But Justin was, he was up in Troop I for a while, and then he came down and was in Pawtucket County at Troop F. Mm-hmm. And he, he had a good name. Somewhere in there he got on motors, so the guys that were closer to the Metro would have known who he was. Mm-hmm. But it probably wasn't until I said, I think the last couple of academies that I got to be involved with, I was lucky enough they would have like a bio. I don't know whether they did that or not, because I would attribute a lot to me getting hired on as a first time go is because of Justin's name was big at the time. Mm-hmm. He had just won Trooper of the Year within a year or two of me getting hired. So, those kind of things might have led them to do that, but I don't know that anybody put any stock. I can tell you, most people thought that Robbie Keeling was my brother because I was in the same academy with BJ Keeling. So they would get, BJ and I screwed up quite a bit. And so there was a lot of times where, you would hear these things about, hey, your brother's saying this and this. I'm like, hope that's not Justin, But now as far as his experience, I probably hadn't made a big enough name for myself for anybody to know Trent at the time, or at least me through Trent.
I wish that would have been true. That's not the case. But it was, first day walking in, like I was, you can't, this place is too small. People talk too much. And they like, as soon as I walked in, they were like, oh, you're Tanner's brother, or you're Justin's brother. You're like, yeah, yes, sir. And there's nothing you could do to hide from it. So I didn't try to hide from it. I just embraced it. And, as soon as the TACs come up, Brett Stevens was a TAC officer in my patrol school. Him and Tanner are good friends. They went to patrol school together. So, there was a lot of pressure there from the beginning. Bless their hearts, the poor two guys on both sides of me on Hell Night that were no longer with us after that first night. And that's kind of on, that was probably Tanner's fault too, that they quit. But, just because, Trooper Stevens or Brett was right there the entire first night, and
on you the whole
he was just really
encouraging you
to be better, to be the best I could be, during that time. So but within that, there's you're thankful because, like I said, not that they were doing anything different, treating me any way different than anybody else, but Brett would give me a harder time or say, do things just because I was Tanner's kid brother, and
What school are you out of?
I'm out of the 61st.
61st.
So I've been on 13 years. So.
Okay. So you've been on quite a bit by the time you came on. What year was that?
2013, you were about 8 years?
Yeah, somewhere just shy. I mean, really 7 and some change.
You'd made a name for yourself by that point.
Oh, yeah.
Other people had made names for me.
Yeah.
I think was the deal. I was just doing my thing.
What were those names?
Be a Tanner.
They tried to drop the trooper off there a couple times, I guess you'd say. But
So individually here, what were your patrol school experiences like?
I think I have to give this caveat so that everybody doesn't just, berate me on the internet. But everybody remembers their patrol school differently, and you're way tougher after your patrol school than you were in it. Mm-hmm. But I had an amazing group of people. I was a young, immature jerk in my patrol school, and I surrounded myself with other like-minded individuals in that way, and we made the academy pretty tough for a lot of people. But not to shout out too many names, I remember Gary Vinson was our TAC, and John Paul, or Captain John Paul, both of them captains now, was our assistant commandant. And we wore the Dickies with our top button. And I remember Lieutenant Paul at the time coming in and saying, go ahead and unbutton those top buttons. And I was like, this is it. We're already graduating. This is it. We weren't upstairs for 5 seconds when, at the time was the first lieutenant, but then, the commandant shows up upstairs and we put the top buttons back on. And I was devastated, but not so devastated having not grown up lower middle class to understand this game. So I said, we will never go to phase 2 again. We will stay in phase 0, and we will do whatever we have to do so that we don't advance, because we don't want them to take anything away from us. If we stay at the ground floor the entire time, that can never hurt us.
Can't fail.
Yep, can't fail. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? Take our seats away? So that was the idea for me and all of that. I met some of the best human beings I've ever met. I've had to since go back and to apologize to everybody, but everybody, I don't know how
A formal public apology.
for everybody in the 55th Academy that hated me, I apologize. But I will tell you, I've gone back. I've apologized to a bunch of them, but I have the utmost respect for everybody that finished out our patrol school, because I don't know what it compares to others, but I know it was tough. And some amazing men have come forth through our academy and done amazing things on the highway patrol. And when you kind of get between your 7th and your 10th year, you see everybody kind of go off on their own path for their careers. And man, we've just got some studs out of ours. And it wasn't a individualized game that we played in the 55th. I mean, we had to become a team like most academies have to. And I can tell you there were days that I would wake up, and if it wasn't for everybody else being there, I'll just stay in bed to figure out how that works out for me.
Who were some of your closest compadre at 55th?
Probably my best friend through the whole deal was Ryan Fike. He's a retired trooper now. And then I became closer with a lot of other people, but there were some, like Tyler Shelby and I had gone through college together, so we were pretty close. And then I got to meet Grant Arnold through Ryan Fike, and then Brett Stevens and I just, for whatever, clicked. I ended up being with BJ Keeling and Lawrence Kimball alphabetically quite a bit, so we were always together as far as the room assignments would go when they would do that, because our tax may have been good at a lot of things, but I don't think their organizational skills outside of alphabetizing everything was a strong suit, and I'll just give that back to them that way. But so that was kind of became really close with Caleb Cole throughout patrol school, and got lucky enough to do some work in that way. I know there's guys up north near you, Shannon Glover's out of that patrol school, and he was kind of a motivational guy through our school. And Chris Lyles, I got to work with him quite a bit. He's out of the 55th, and it's just to have a bunch of buds. Paige Dow, Paige is a solid dude, and it's so funny because and I know 49 of us graduated, so if I forgot you, I apologize. I'm just kind of going through the Rolodex of who I can just see impact me. Sean Cummings and I, we would every morning tell each other we're on the bubble, and we're ready for that bubble to burst, but neither of us would burst each other's bubbles to let each other quit. So you would just have that all the time. I'm really blessed to work with a littermate now, Forrest White. It's just all of these men don't realize the impact they had on a young man at the time who was way probably too immature to be in an Oklahoma Highway Patrol Academy. So I think all of them had a part to play, and some that didn't finish graduating. We had a few towards the end that we hate to see go, but they have their reasons for it. Those guys had a huge impact on all of that too. My workout partner was Matt Mize, and Matt's got a reputation of having a certain attitude, but I tried to put a smile on his face every morning that we got together, and he was scowling about that, but I'm pretty sure I got him to smile a couple of times.
So before we go into your academy experience, did you ever try to talk him out of going to the patrol at any time?
No, I think Trent and I are very like-minded, but the opposite of that is we do things differently. He handled his moving into the highway patrol different than I would have done it. It's not negative because the outcome is what it is. But there were times where I said, hey, you need to be serious about this and take it serious. But that was probably me talking to a mirror version of me at the same time, if that makes sense. It wasn't talking to him. I was saying, if it was me, I would do these things. The only difference between us at the time is that I had already been successful in that thing. So, but, really, other than tell him about the same advice that my other brother gave me, is like, don't quit. The only thing I added on to that, I added a comma, as if, but if you do, change your last name.
Well, it's just your last name.
Yeah, that's correct. So he gets to keep it. I was just hoping to get a couple extra nameplates out of the whole deal, just in case.
Tell us about your experience at patrol school.
Yeah, so I had two brothers beforehand, and you would ask them, like, hey, they would tell you war stories about how hard it is, and then you'll get smokings and things like that. You're like, oh, okay, it's like, it'll be like a hard football practice. You're like, oh, yeah, when we were competitive athletes, and so it was like, oh, I can handle that, and that's not a big deal. But you don't know how it is until you're here. You can assume and workout, but when you're doing, knuckle push-ups on a tile floor on their count, it's different. You can't train for that. And that, as much as you worked out and trained before you got here, like you just, the stress, the mental, suffering from that is just, building you up to, be able to handle yourself under stressful situations. And so it was very difficult, but I would, and like Tanner said, like you would find people that you could, that they were in the same spot you were at, and so they're struggling too. And I didn't have a family, so I was single. These guys, I can remember like the first night, like when they got letters in and from their wives, or they had pictures from their kids, and they were crying. And I was like, oh my God, thank goodness I don't have that to worry about. I just have to worry about me and hopefully somebody sends me because my backup plan was okay, but having two brothers, it's like if I quit, okay, I got to move out to California, I'm gonna sell sunglasses.
That was your backup?
That was my backup plan.
Oh, Lord.
So I was like, okay. Then I was like, I can never go to Thanksgiving, I can never go to Christmas. So I was like,
You can go to those things, just not with us.
yeah, you're right.
Find a new
Not to give
family.
gospel
So I really had no backup plan, and so I was just like, don't quit, don't give them a reason to quit. And I just training for my patrol school, we started in March. I would go to our local track, and I would wear the clothes that I had to wear for PT, and I would run at the coldest times and do grass drills, stuff like that, just to prepare for. And I just would do. I wanted to suffer way more, on my own before I got into that. And being the youngest of four boys, there was not a lot of mental things they could do for me. I've been called a lot of things by my family before I came to patrol school, and not that, that degrading and things like that. But, they would, and so the mental side of what they were saying to me before you come here is like, if you can be in the best shape as you can physically, that'll help you out. Now you can fight that battle mentally. But, and as you guys know, it's like you have good days and you had bad days. I never thought about quitting. I just always thought about, man, this really sucks. And it's like, 20, when your first day and you sit down in the classroom and you're thinking 20 weeks of that. I never thought it was going to end. It was just like, well, okay, we're a week, and you're like, there's still 19 weeks. And then, you're suffering, and you're getting better. Like, Terrence, you're coming together as a team. It doesn't feel like it at the times. I can remember dreading flag detail. We couldn't march. There's people, Mitch Conley could not march. He marched the same at week 1 as he marched the same at week 20. So, I mean, like, we were out of step the entire time. But I can just remember going out for flag detail and just like, oh, they're going to kill us when we get up there. And, they by saying that they were going to kill us, it was just, they were just poured the stress on, you're held accountable for your mistakes. And, because that, the standard hasn't changed since 1937. It has not changed. The standard is excellence. And so you're just striving to be excellent, the best you can be as an individual and as a group. And you're just trying to do that with, probably at the time, 60 of us who have extreme backgrounds that, from, Joe Green out of my patrol school was a welder, well, I can't weld. And, I was going to aviation school. I'd been a cop for, about 2 years before I came here. And so that, I kind of knew a little bit about the cop world, and my brothers were trooper, but that was about it. I can remember them asking me, like, well, what's next? I'm like, hey, dude, they just told me not to quit. I don't know anything. They gave me just zero details. And I would get mad at them. And because I was like, hey, are you holding out on me? I'm your brother. Like, we're family. Is like, hey, you just got to earn it. And so, but within earning it, there was the pride that comes with it on, like I'm happy to wear this uniform on because I just knew what the work took to earn it. And so polishing my brass, polishing my boots, and obviously it looks like my hair is long, but I get the haircut tomorrow. But my guy Tom, he could not get me in. But
Tom.
yeah. So Whisker Barbershop, Weatherford, Oklahoma, look him up. He's gonna pay me for that. Actually, I'm just kidding. But no, but I'm prideful. Still 13 years doing this. Got to do a lot of cool things. I'm still extremely prideful on what I had to do, the work I had to do to earn to get to wear this.
Who were you close to in the academy?
Joe Green, he's still like we talk to each other, not as much as we used to, but he's one of those guys you don't talk to for 3 months and then call him up, don't miss a beat, talk to him for 3 hours. Sammy Lee, we used to rap in the bathroom just to like focus on something else. Kyle Johnson, who Tanner, he's a Weatherford kid. He was really never encouraging. He was always in a bad mood, but I would always try to make him happy. And if we'd show up on Sundays, like, oh gosh, I'm like, we're gonna make it, Kyle. But those Jeff Fielder, Nick Dees, we lost Nick shortly after our academy. But me, once you got in the skills, the room changes and that stuff kind of dialed down. So it was me and Jeff and Nick Dees. We lived together for a while, and man, just like getting to know Nick, getting to know Jeff. I wasn't married at the time, and Nick was married, and he would tell us about his kids, and I was like, I could only focus on this, but he'd be like, man, I just miss my kids. And now being a father and a husband now, it's like, oh, I could not imagine having to leave my family. Those guys that do, man, my hat's off to them, because that is such a sacrifice. But yeah, man, Nick and Jeff, we were pretty tight there towards the end.
It's a good group.
Yeah.
You guys mentioned some really awesome names out there for sure.
Yeah, they're all studs.
So now you guys are out of patrol school. Did you ever have an opportunity to work together?
So, yeah, you guys went in 2013?
Yep. So it would have been about 6 months,
Yeah.
and then he transferred to training, took over the LADTU program.
Okay.
Yeah, but we did end up working. Our mother still lives in Weatherford, so ended up working and like sliding over there, and both of us working Thanksgiving night together and stuff like that. Was
Yeah, we were.
a cool experience.
So where Tanner's assignment was at, he was on Beckham, Roger Mills County, and I was on Custer, Washita, Dewey County, and so we were on the same schedule. So, but when I came out, it was we were pretty short-handed. So, most of the time it was like one or two guys on the east side, and then like one guy on the west side. That's for 5 counties, and so if we didn't have anything going on, we would always meet. We would either, what was that, 73 and 34, and we'd meet up there, just kind of door up, talk to each other, or we'd go to the 53-mile marker on the interstate, and we'd work together. But I was so new. He's got irons in the fire at this point. He's got ERT, so we didn't. As much as we wanted to work with each other, we didn't get to as much as we thought.
Did you guys have any memorable calls that you went on with each other?
Well, was that Christmas or?
I think it was Thanksgiving when that guy was car be good.
So it was Christmas or Thanksgiving. Fog, rolls in, and man, we're both working, and like we put our plates down, like scoot our seats up, and like my phone rings. Well, so we get a call. Well, my brother being a good partner that he is, he was like, okay, I'll go with you. So this guy had reared into somebody on the interstate, and then he just ran from him. Well, what was it? About 20 minutes later, a call comes out of this guy, rolls his pickup. Well, we had dealt with this lady, the victim of the crash. Well, we're sitting there, and then that other one comes out. So, it's dense fog, so we're driving like, 50 miles an hour?
Yeah, we're not going.
Yeah,
and I was on 66, and so this is where this guy crashed. So obviously, for young troopers out there, if you're going to an area that a person crashed, it's a good idea to be cautious,
ready
as you approach that area. So I was running pretty slow.
Yeah. So, and then we're like, my first thought was like, oh dang, this is just the bad fog. Well, we're working this crash on the rollover, and I'd already gotten the latest information. Well, she rolls up, and she's like, that's the truck, and so he ended up being drunk. So I had to work. Obviously I was new. And, being the younger brother, Tanner was like, I'll work the crash, you take the drug. So I arrested him, and Tanner worked the crash. And then by that time, it was like midnight. So I think we had, we went to a gas station and had, burritos together for the night.
Gas station for the
Gas station, right, which was dangerous. So,
memorable for me is that a few years later, Trent gets on the TAC team. And a lot of the guys, the leadership on the TAC team, were gracious enough to let me be involved in a couple of their calls and everything like that. So it was really cool being on that ERT side, getting to kind of see Trent in his element on the tactical team side, because he had trained really hard for that and did a really good job at that for a very long time. And so those were kind of my favorites. You know, you kind of get to see behind the curtain on what they do, and being friends with a lot of those guys, they built trust with me. So, you know, they typically, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but they typically pray before they go on a mission, and they have just a little bit of, everybody gets serious time, and everybody's talking, and then once the pray hits, and then everybody switches it on, and everybody's going. But there were 2 or 3 of those where it was cool to see everybody work. I love one thing I love about the highway patrol is when it's time to go to work, troopers have a good reputation of being able to be very good at their jobs. And so seeing that, and then later on, the not the calls per se that are more enjoyable for me, the time we get to spend. He's a DT instructor and a firearms instructor and LADT instructor, so getting to train with them quite a bit in those arenas is fun. You know, I love training. It's one of my favorite things on earth to do. And, you know, Trent coming into that training aspect with everything and getting to kind of be I kind of separated myself a little bit from it, but, you know, being the supervisor over his defensive tactics instructor school and everything was fun because there's a lot of grappling and, you know, a lot of training, sparring, and everything that happens in those. So you get to do that with your little brother, and it's, you know, it's just Proverbs 27:17 all the time. It's just, you're just sharpening each other and making each other better in that vein. So it's, those are the things that I'll remember the most. I mean, you know, my wife and I go back to Elk City. I lived there for just over 9 years, and I don't remember anything about it. You know, so there are things that I remember, a few incidents that were involved, that we go there now, and I'm like, I can't believe we lived here for nearly a decade in that part, because, you know, it's like with anything that people that come before you tell you, this job goes so fast, you know, and the slowest I remember this job being was the first 6 months of working the road, and then the last 6 months before I turned 20 on the patrol, because it's just like, I need to get that 20th year just in case I screw up big time. I can at least retire, you know.
I'm a month out.
Yeah, and just like, and you're just kind of like hit pause on everything. I don't even want to leave the house.
Can you go through and kind of take us through your career with the patrol?
Yeah. Oh man, I will tell you, to no end, been insanely blessed with the highway patrol for the jobs that I've been. You know, I ultimately just asked a question, and people keep saying yes, so I keep asking questions. So in 2014, I went and I attribute this a lot to Brett Stevens, who was in the training division at the time. We had about a 3-year gap of not having a lead LADT instructor that was full-time. Keith Najera was running it for a few years under the guise of Lieutenant Jim Fisher. And they did a little competitive process, I guess you would say, and they tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, do you want to do this? And I said, I absolutely want to do this. And so finally, you know, I got to be the lead LADT instructor. I did that for just that 6 years. And then one of those things happened. I got to go be an executive security with those guys and work directly with, you know, Governor Stitt in that vein, and had a great time doing that, and got to, you know, work with some amazing people on the highway patrol. I'm just going to continue to say that everywhere I've been, people have been amazing at their craft, you know. I did that for right at about, so to a little backstory on that, I started going in 2009 to the personal security, the PSD school, personal security detail school. And I went 7 times and taught in the last 2 before I could actually get into executive security. So obviously there was a plan for me, and it wasn't to go directly to ES. But for whatever reason, I got lucky enough to go to ES and then get promoted to lieutenant in executive security. And did that for a couple years. And a year to the date of my promotion, I got moved over to the training division to come back and handle defensive tactics and firearms, which was amazing because, once again, you get to hang out with troopers all the time. And that's not as... It is a job, but it's more experience-based, you know, when you're in the training environment. So I had an awesome time with that. And if I got to work with, you know, some of my best friends on the patrol. I get to work with RJ Ellis every day, which is, you know, was a dream come true. And then as happens when you take that dream come true and he's got a job to do and I've got a job to do, we've kind of, you know, separated. We only get to see each other certain times of the day because, you know, being a lieutenant versus being a trooper, try to make time to get together to train. And then I did that for, I want to say, 18 months, somewhere in there, and an explosion of 5 captain spots came over, and I lived in right smack dab in the middle where all of them could be, and was very fortunate enough to get promoted to the rank of captain over troops and GNM simultaneously. So that's
basically the entire southwestern part of Oklahoma.
That's what appears on the map. Yes.
Yes.
So
A big area that you're in charge of.
yeah. So well, I say that I command it. I'll say that. I'm not saying I'm in charge of it, but yeah. And since then, just trying to, I think what needs to be said constantly on this is that the Oklahoma State Trooper is the reason anybody that's not a state trooper but wears this uniform has a job. So no matter what rank you are, if you're going to, to protect the governor, you're doing it so that the Oklahoma State Trooper can do their job and they can push a black and white or an all black or any marked unit up and down the road and provide a service. Major Nathan Mackey and I have been friends for a long time, and we were looking at Excel spreadsheets, and we were just sitting there talking. I was like, you never would have convinced me in 2005 I would be looking at Excel spreadsheets. And I don't, it was just probably the Holy Spirit hit me, but I said, the only way I can fathom this in my mind that I even care about what's on this computer screen right now is that somebody was doing all this work when I was a young state trooper, going out, getting in trouble, having a good time, just living this dream. And I said, I will bear that cross now and do that if somebody gets to have a good time, especially in the 11 counties between Troops G&M.
Well, and just hearing you talk about your career progression too, it goes to show how many different things you can do as a state trooper.
Oh, absolutely.
And just, people out there that might think, well, all you do is write tickets, and it's not even close to that. Like, it's amazing the different opportunities that there are.
Well, and I've said this for a long time, and this is not demeaning, and if it's taken that way, don't take it that way. The only thing that an Oklahoma State Trooper is really, really good at is adaptation. Is they are able to go into an environment and adapt. And a lot of them don't know the environment they're going into, such as you get out of the academy and you go and you're from Stevens County, per se. This is just for Mason Lang. He's from the Stevens County area, I believe. And then he goes to Cimarron County.
Right.
And then has to transfer back. You see that's insane adaptation. A lot of people would quit, because they're like, I didn't know there was a Felt, Oklahoma. Yep.
That's one of the big things they push in you in the academy, right? And that helps you to be able to adapt and take command of whatever situation you find yourself in.
Yeah.
So, Trent, what about your career?
So I started out in Troop H. Washita County was my first assignment. Lived out there, was trooper for about a year and a half, and then I was, I had an opportunity come before me that I tried out for it, and I got on the TAC team with only having a year and a half on the patrol. So just got on and just started training and trying to get better. And when you're new in those environments, it is an extreme curve if you have to catch up quickly. So you don't get to just get on one of those on a team like that and just low few. It's a dead sprint. And I can remember being brand new and going to trainings and like mentally drained by the end of it. Then you would work out, and then the training was hard. But got on there, and I was on there for about 10 and a half years. After that, I worked in Troop H for probably 2 years. Went to Oklahoma City, worked in Troop A for about 10 months. Boomeranged back out to Troop H, and worked out there for about 8 years. Did a short stint with the Wellness Division for about a year and a half, and then came back to Troop H, and that's where I'm at right now.
So,
What are family get-togethers like for you guys now? Do we talk shop, or are we able to shut it off?
I will speak for myself here. I can shut it off. We'll talk about it for, obviously it's an interest, but, for me, and listen, for 10 and a half years, man, being a member of the TAC team, like my life was, you're married to a device. And I'm not saying that in a negative way, but, the commitment, like if you're in state, you are on call 24/7, 365. The only time you're not required to go to a call is if you are out of state. And, that was it. So, I always had my phone on, and the way things evolved, I can remember when Tanner first got on, you guys had pagers. Well, we never had a pager. We got a state phone, and then it was always have your state phone on you. And then, I felt important. I had two phones, but really the only phone, this was like if a call hadn't happened. But then what would happen is, apps, come along, and, there's other ways of getting a hold of people. So, you were all in, and when you're in that environment, and you guys know this, you're getting constant emails, agency assist, and when you're, and I loved it. And I dedicated my life to that for a long, long time. And, but you just, it's tasking. It's tasking on your family. It's tasking on your life. So for me now that I've stepped away from that, it's easier for me to be like, okay, I'm not at work, so I don't have to deal with it. But for Tanner, him having to be the troop commander of 2 troops, he gets those same emails that I used to get, and so agency assist or somebody's, gets hurt, or a workman's comp deal, or a shooting, or clear the net emails. And so it's easier for me now that I've closed that chapter on the TAC team. But we still talk, what's going on, and probably just like everybody else. But when you do it, and this, that when you're at work, you're discussing the issues with the patrol constantly. So and when you get together, so now it's like when we go get together, it's like I want to spend time with my nephews, and they're in high school and they're getting older. I want them to tell me about their lives and not just hear about what's going on with the Highway Patrol.
Do we think we're going to have any additions to this legacy family? We should. First of all, I should have asked about your brother, your half brother. I need to start doing pre-interviews to find out if I knew your brother Justin was a trooper. We definitely would have had him on.
Well, actually, there's 4 brothers.
Yep.
What does the 4th brother do?
He is I'm probably going to say this wrong, but he is like the regional safety manager for FedEx.
Okay.
So
he went a totally different route.
Yeah, he's way up there. He's the person that we go to vacation at his house, and we have to spend the day with him, telling him how much we love him, just so our kids can live in that lifestyle.
And what's his name? We got to mention his
Matt.
name. Yeah. There you go. That's your country.
Yeah. So no, I mean, I would love to do another one too. With Jess, that's why we didn't tell you, is this secured another spot.
There we go.
We'll do another one. Make sure there's a PT period 1 on this one. And then, but yeah, I think our stuff, it ends up going about work. Matt's an administrator within FedEx, so that's an outside source that I can talk to about the managing aspect of trying to promote and get appointed to the position of major or higher above that. So I can talk to a guy that deals more within the numbers aspect than the relational aspect of, I think that. My favorite job on the Highway Patrol, by far, was being a state trooper, regardless. That was my favorite. But a job that I find very important now is this troop commander role, which is on the last, and this is no offense, we have great majors that go out and they work with guys, but I get to see a name and a face at the same time versus seeing names on a paper. And if they don't know that person individually, then that's harder to put a name with that face. And so that's why I think the role of troop commander, especially advocating on behalf of where your assignment is to a major, is trying to show that passion about taking care of these people, because I serve state troopers and lieutenants, but I support a major, lieutenant colonel, and a colonel up into the commissioner. So you're kind of that middleman of trying to figure out if something comes down, how do I put that information out to where it's workable and it's applicable, and then on the other side of that is how do I do this. So I think that's the most amazing spot of the way the patrol works in this, is that we still have that relationship to where he being a trooper and with us being at a family gathering can still talk with people outside of the patrol. So it's not all just, oh, I worked this bad crash or anything like that. There's things that we can garner even from Justin working as a safety man for Through Tubing Solutions, that we can garner information from each other. So it leads to shop, because Justin still likes talking about the patrol. Matt is, we kind of get to bond based upon the downtime of not talking about anything, because you can tell when all 3, Justin, Trent, and I are there together, Matt rolls his eyes immediately. He's like, I'll be back in 30 minutes. Be done talking about Oklahoma Highway Patrol.
Yeah.
So I guess you and Captain Morgan are the ones that have got two troops, right?
Yes.
So you need to go talk to the mate and talk to Jack and see if you can get troops commander written across the back of your unit.
Troop with an S.
With an S, yeah.
I could just do that.
You could, absolutely.
Yeah, I just put it on there. Yeah.
Are you expecting any more Keaslers on the patrol? Do you foresee that happening?
Are you pushing your kids in that direction?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't know that they're going to want to do. I've got one going to Cadet Lawman this year. He has shown interest in it a little bit. Asked, I have to kind of, the question you asked before about interesting careers, I have to say, hey, listen, your Uncle Trent and I need to include your Uncle Justin, we haven't had common careers. You know, we've got to do some cool things. And it's not consistent with everybody's experience on the highway patrol, so I don't want you to think you're going to do all these things because you've seen it. But that's really the only one for me. But I've met some of the best men and women alive on the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, and I would love and be honored for one of my kids to want to do that, as long as they knew they weren't doing it for me. That would be my deal. I don't want, my kids don't owe me anything in that realm of following in my footsteps, you know.
Yeah. So, how old are your kids, Trent?
I have a 7-year-old boy, and so a couple days ago, my wife she's a teacher, and you know she's doing state testing, so I've kind of been in charge of dropping off, picking up, you know, and which, you know, the good thing about the patrol is it allows you to, you know, be able to do those things sometimes while you're working if you can. So I pick them up the other day, and you know I'm in my patrol car, and you know the teacher opens the door and he hops in, and she's like, he was telling everybody today at school that he's going to be a state trooper when he grows up, and he's going to be on the TAC team. And she's like, I don't know what that is, but he tells everybody he's going to be on the TAC team. And, you know, we'll be, and, you know, that would, you know, now he sees that, you know, me back working the road, and he sees, you know, this uniform every day. But in the first part of his life, he didn't see that so much. You know, I was in a capacity where I wore a lot of plain clothes and was doing things, you know, with the U.S. Marshal Service, and you know, just plain clothes TAC team stuff, and you know, or he'd see me in like my multicam uniform that we wear, or that they wear on their TAC team, and he will ask me, you know, probably about every couple of weeks, he's like, when are you going to get back on the TAC team? And you know, I'll just like, hey, you know, I want to spend more time with you, buddy, and you know, be here, and you know, and now that I've left that part is, you know, I'm his baseball coach, and you know, I coach his football teams, and I'm at every practice, and you know, I get to be at every game. And the good thing about the patrol and, you know, my current assignment is that it's encouraged. You know, they want you to be, you know, you sacrifice so much, and well, it's a willing sacrifice, and my wife understands that. But I will say, one of the great things about the patrol is it will never tell you not to spend time with your family. Now, if you're taking care of business and doing what you're supposed to be doing, they will never say you can't go to your kids' ball games, or you can't go to your practices or anything like that. You know, obviously you're still at call status, but if, you know, hopefully nothing's going on, you get to, and the patrol encourages me to do that, and I'm very thankful for that, and my family is too. So he, you know, 7 years old, you know, I mean, you know, I can pick him up today, and, you know, he wants to be a fighter jet pilot, and that's cool too. So, you know, I'm just enjoying this chapter right now. And if he wants to do it and is serious about it, I will encourage it. I will tell him that it's not going to be easy, but just like Tanner said, don't do this for me.
Yeah.
So, well, you guys did a great job as our first Legacy podcast.
And you're welcome.
We thank you very much for doing this. And
I'll have you back on for part 2.
I guess we
Forced you to have
will be forthcoming.
Yeah. Thank you for having us. Yeah, thanks for having us, guys.